Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe for more educational English videos like this one. Asterisk a change of plans. Last year, something unexpected happened to me that completely changed the way I think about my future. At that time, I was working in a small office in my hometown. My job was stable and my colleagues were friendly, but deep inside, I felt that something was missing. Every day looked the same. I woke up at 8 a.m., had a quick breakfast, and rushed to catch the bus. I spent most of my day sitting in front of a computer, answering emails and preparing reports. One afternoon, during my lunch break, I decided to go for a walk in a nearby park. The weather was beautiful, and I needed some fresh air. While I was walking, I noticed a group of tourists listening to a guide. The guide was speaking English fluently and telling interesting stories about the city. For some reason, I stopped and listened. I realized that I could understand most of what he was saying, but I didn't feel confident enough to speak like him. At that moment, I asked myself a simple question: why not try something different? That day, I went home and started searching for English courses online. I found several options, but I chose one that focused on speaking and listening skills. At first, it was difficult. I felt nervous every time I had to speak, even in online classes. Sometimes I made mistakes, and sometimes I didn't understand everything. However, I didn't give up. I practiced every day. I listened to podcasts while commuting, watched movies in English with subtitles, and even talked to myself in English at home. Slowly, I started to feel more comfortable. After a few months, something surprising happened. One of my friends, who works in tourism, told me about a temporary job opportunity as an assistant tour guide. They needed someone who could speak basic English and communicate with tourists. At first, I hesitated. I didn't feel ready, but then I remembered the day in the park. I decided to take the risk. The first day was challenging. I was nervous, and my voice was shaking when I spoke. But the tourists were kind and patient. They smiled, asked questions, and seemed interested in what I was saying. This gave me confidence. Day by day, I improved. I learned new words, became faster at understanding different accents, and started to enjoy speaking English. I also realized that communication is not about being perfect. It's about connecting with people. By the end of the summer, I had a completely different perspective on my life. I decided to quit my office job and continue working in tourism. Now, I meet people from all over the world, and every day is different. Looking back, I think that small moment in the park changed everything. If I hadn't stopped to listen, I might still be sitting in that office, wondering what else I could do. So, if you ever feel stuck, maybe all you need is one small change, or one moment of courage.
The weekend that changed everything. 2 months ago, I had one of the most unusual weekends of my life. It started as a simple plan, but it turned into something I will never forget. It was a Friday evening, and I had just finished a long and stressful week at work. I was feeling tired and didn't want to do anything special. My original plan was to stay at home, order some food, and watch a movie. However, my friend Daniel called me and suggested going on a short trip. At first, I refused. I told him that I was too tired and just wanted to relax. But he insisted. He said, "You always say you want to try new things, but you never actually do them." His words made me think for a moment. Maybe he was right. So, after a few minutes of hesitation, I agreed. We decided to go to a small coastal town about 2 hours away from the city. The plan was simple: leave early in the morning, spend the day there, and come back on Sunday. The next morning, we woke up at 8 a.m. It was still dark outside, and I almost changed my mind again. But Daniel was already ready and waiting, so I didn't want to disappoint him. The drive wasn't peaceful. There were not many cars on the road, and we listened to music while watching the sunrise. As the sun slowly appeared, the sky turned orange and pink. It was one of the most beautiful views I had seen in a long time. When we arrived at the town, everything felt different. The air was fresh, and we could hear the sound of the waves. There were small cafes, narrow streets, and friendly people everywhere. It was nothing like the busy city we came from. We spent the morning walking around and exploring the area. At one point, we found a small local market where people were selling handmade products and fresh food. I bought some homemade jam and a piece of bread that was still warm. Later, we decided to sit at a cafe near the sea. We ordered coffee and just watched the waves for a while. It was so relaxing that we didn't even feel the need to talk much. In the afternoon, something unexpected happened. While we were walking near the beach, we saw a group of people preparing for a small event. There was music, decorations, and a lot of activity. We got curious and asked one of the locals what was going on. He explained that it was a small community festival. They invited us to join, even though we were visitors. At first, we felt a bit shy, but everyone was so welcoming that we quickly felt comfortable. There was live music, traditional dancing, and delicious food. At one point, someone invited me to dance. I didn't know the steps, but I tried to follow the others. Everyone laughed, including me, and it became one of the funniest moments of the day. As the evening came, the atmosphere became even more magical. Lights were turned on, and people gathered around to watch a small performance. I remember thinking, if I had stayed at home, I would have missed all of this. On Sunday morning, we woke up early again and took a walk by the sea before leaving. The town was quiet, and the only sound was the waves. It was the perfect ending to an unforgettable weekend. On the way back, we talked about everything we had experienced. Daniel smiled and said, "See, sometimes the best things happen when you don't plan too much." He was right. That weekend taught me an important lesson. Stepping out of your comfort zone can lead to amazing experiences. Since then, I try to say yes more often even when I feel tired or unsure, because you never know what might happen.
The job interview I almost missed. About a year ago, I had an experience that I still think about today. It was the day of an important job interview, one that I almost missed completely. At that time, I had been looking for a new job for several months. I was not happy in my current position, and I wanted a change. Every day after work, I spent hours searching for job opportunities, updating my CV, and sending applications. Sometimes I felt hopeful, but most of the time, I felt tired and a bit discouraged. One day, I received an email from a company I really liked. They invited me for an interview the following week. I was excited, but also very nervous. This felt like a big opportunity, and I didn't want to lose it. For the next few days, I prepared as much as I could. I practiced answering common interview questions, researched the company, and even chose my clothes in advance. I wanted everything to be perfect. Finally, the day of the interview arrived. I woke up early, but something didn't feel right. I felt a bit stressed and distracted. While I was having breakfast, I kept thinking about all the possible questions they might ask. What are your strengths? Why do you want to work here? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? After getting ready, I left the house earlier than necessary because I didn't want to be late. The interview was in another part of the city, so I needed to take a bus and then walk for about 10 minutes. At first, everything was going according to plan. The bus arrived on time, and I found a seat near the window. I tried to relax by listening to music, but I couldn't stop thinking about the interview. About halfway through the journey, something unexpected happened. The bus suddenly stopped, and after a few minutes, the driver made an announcement. There was a technical problem, and we had to get off and wait for another bus. At that moment, I felt panic. I checked the time and realized that I might be late if I didn't find another way quickly. Some people decided to wait, but I didn't want to take that risk. I got off the bus and started walking fast. Then I opened a map on my phone to see if there was another way to reach the location. I saw that I could take a different bus from a nearby street, so I began walking in that direction. However, I wasn't very familiar with the area, and I started to feel a bit lost. While I was trying to find the right street, I noticed a small cafe. For a second, I thought about going inside to ask for directions, but I was worried about losing more time. Still, I decided to go in. Inside the cafe, there was an older man sitting near the window. I politely asked him if he knew how to get to the address I was looking for. He smiled and said, "Yes, I know that place. It's not far from here." He gave me clear directions and even suggested a shortcut that was not on the map. I thanked him and quickly left the cafe. Thanks to his help, I managed to find the correct street much faster than I expected. In fact, I arrived just 5 minutes before my interview. When I entered the building, I was still a bit out of breath, but also very relieved. I had made it. The interview itself went better than I expected. At first, I was a little nervous, but after a few minutes, I started to feel more comfortable. The interviewer was friendly, and the questions were not as difficult as I had imagined. At one point, they asked me how I handle unexpected problems. I smiled and told them what had just happened that morning. They seemed impressed with how I stayed calm and found a solution. A few days later, I received another email. I got the job. Looking back, I think that day taught me something important. No matter how well you plan, things can always go wrong. But what really matters is how you react in those moments. If I had panicked and given up, I might have missed that opportunity completely. Sometimes, success is not about being perfect. It's about continuing, even when things don't go as planned.
The day I decided to start over, a few years ago, I reached a point in my life where I felt completely stuck. Nothing was seriously wrong, but nothing felt right either. I had a routine, a job, and a group of friends, but every day felt predictable and repetitive. I woke up at the same time, followed the same schedule, and had the same conversations. Even my weekends started to feel boring. I would meet the same people, go to the same places, and talk about the same topics. At first, I didn't think much about it. I told myself that this was just normal adult life, but slowly, I began to feel less motivated. I lost interest in things I used to enjoy, and I often felt tired, even when I had enough rest. One evening, after a particularly long day, I came home and sat in silence. I didn't turn on the TV or check my phone. I just sat there and thought. I asked myself a simple but uncomfortable question: am I happy? The answer was not clear. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't excited about my life either. It felt like I was just going through the motions. That night, I couldn't sleep well. My mind was full of thoughts. I started thinking about the things I had always wanted to do but never tried. Learning a new language, traveling alone, changing careers, meeting new people. But every time I thought about these things, I also thought about the risks. What if I fail? What if it's too late? What will people think? The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not completely motivated, but more aware. I realized that if I didn't change something, I would feel the same way for a long time. So I decided to start small. That week, I signed up for an evening class. It was a communication course, something I had been interested in for a while, but never had the courage to try. On the first day, I almost didn't go. I felt nervous and uncomfortable. I didn't know anyone, and I was afraid of feeling out of place, but I went anyway. When I arrived, I saw that everyone else looked just as nervous as I felt. That made me feel a little better. The teacher was friendly and encouraged us to introduce ourselves. At first, I spoke very little. I listened more than I talked. But as the days passed, I started to participate more. I realized that nobody expected me to be perfect. After a few weeks, something interesting happened. I started looking forward to the class. It became the most exciting part of my week. I also began to notice small changes in my daily life. I felt more confident when speaking to people, even at work. I became more open to trying new things. Encouraged by this, I made another decision. I planned a short solo trip. Traveling alone was something I had always been afraid of. I worried about getting lost, feeling lonely, or facing unexpected problems. But at the same time, I felt curious. So I chose a small, quiet destination and booked everything in advance. When the day arrived, I felt both excited and nervous. The first day of the trip was not easy. I felt a bit uncomfortable being alone in a new place. I didn't know where to go or what to do, but instead of staying in my room, I forced myself to go outside. I walked around, explored the streets, and sat in a small cafe. At one point, I started a conversation with a stranger. It was a simple conversation, but it made me feel more connected. Day by day, things became easier. I learned how to enjoy my own company. I noticed details I usually ignored. The sound of the streets, the behavior of people, the small moments. By the end of the trip, I felt proud of myself, not because everything was perfect, but because I had tried something new. When I returned home, I realized something important. Change doesn't have to be big or sudden. Sometimes, it starts with a small decision, like signing up for a class or taking a short trip. Those small steps can slowly lead to bigger changes. Today, my life is still not perfect, but it feels more meaningful. I try new things more often, meet different people, and challenge myself in ways I never did before. And it all started with one simple question: am I happy?
The stranger on the train. It was a cold morning in early winter when this story began. I remember the day very clearly, even though at that time, I thought it would be just another normal day. I had to travel to another city for a short business meeting. It wasn't something I was excited about. In fact, I almost canceled the trip because I didn't feel very motivated that week. But in the end, I decided to go. I arrived at the train station earlier than necessary. The platform was crowded, and people were rushing in every direction. Some were checking their tickets, others were carrying heavy bags, and a few were just standing quietly, looking at their phones. When the train finally arrived, I found my seat near the window. I like window seats because I enjoy watching the view, especially during long journeys. A few minutes later, an older man came and sat next to me. He looked calm and relaxed, unlike most of the other passengers. He placed a small bag under his seat and smiled politely. At first, we didn't speak. I put on my headphones and looked outside as the train started moving. The city slowly disappeared, and the landscape changed into open fields and small villages. But after about half an hour, I noticed that the man next to me was reading a book. It wasn't in my language, so I couldn't understand the title. But I was curious. After a while, he closed the book and looked out the window. Then he turned to me and said, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" I removed my headphones and smiled. "Yes, it is," I replied. That simple sentence started a conversation that I will never forget. We began talking about small things at first: the weather, the journey, the city we were going to. But slowly, the conversation became deeper. He told me that he used to travel a lot when he was younger. He had visited many countries and worked in different jobs. I found his stories interesting and asked him many questions. At one point, I asked him, "What was the most important thing you learned from all your travels?" He thought for a moment before answering. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I learned that most people are afraid of the wrong things." I was surprised. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smiled and continued, "People are often afraid of change, new experiences, or making mistakes. But they are not afraid of staying in the same place for too long, even if they are unhappy." His words made me think. I told him about my own situation, how I felt stuck in my job, and how I wanted to do something different but didn't know where to start. He listened carefully and didn't interrupt. Then he said, "You don't need to change everything at once. Just change one thing. That's enough to begin." We continued talking for hours. He shared stories about times when he made difficult decisions, took risks, and sometimes failed. But he never spoke about failure as something negative. Instead, he described it as a natural part of life. At one point, I realized that I had completely forgotten about my meeting. I wasn't thinking about work, stress, or responsibilities. I was just listening. As the train got closer to our destination, I felt a strange feeling, something between happiness and sadness. I was happy to have had this conversation, but I was also sad because it was about to end. When the train stopped, people quickly stood up and started leaving. The man picked up his bag and turned to me. "It was nice talking to you," he said. "It was nice talking to you too," I replied. I wanted to ask for his name, or maybe his contact information, but for some reason, I didn't. He simply smiled, said goodbye, and disappeared into the crowd. I never saw him again. That day, I went to my meeting as planned. Everything went normally, but my mind was still on the conversation I had on the train. In the following weeks, I kept thinking about what he said. You don't need to change everything. Just change one thing. So I decided to follow his advice. I started with something small. I changed my daily routine. I began waking up earlier and using the time to learn new skills. Then I started meeting new people and exploring different opportunities. Slowly, my life began to change, not in a dramatic way, but in a meaningful one. Today, I still don't know who that man was or where he came from, but I know one thing for sure. Sometimes, A short conversation with a stranger can have a bigger impact than years of routine, and sometimes, the right words come at exactly the right moment, even if they come from someone you will never see again.